Hey friend, this is a little video about how to play the singing saw, the age-old traditional instrument of lumberjacks and other people who cause destruction to large wooden things. The singing saw is, this is my saw. It is from Ace Hardware, which is a hardware chain in America. There are saws made specifically to play. They're specifically musical saws. They're not much different from, construction saws. They're usually a little bit longer, so you get a little bit more range out of them. Sometimes the teeth are blunted, but I think a saw sounds better once it's been, used a couple times. Right, so you probably know how to play the saw already. I'm just going to go through all the steps that I have in case what I do is different from what you do. The saw is a sine wave instrument. You make a sound by creating two intersecting arcs that then sort of resonate in a fancy way. So the way I do that is first, the most important thing is your base. You want to have your grip on the saw with your legs be really, really strong, because that is that's sort of where everything comes from. If your grip is really strong and really reliable, then you can go from there and build on that. If your grip is weak and it's causing fluctuations through your saw, then your tone is going to be unreliable. You're not going to have the notes where you think the note should be. So you want to have your grip really strong. Then I put my thumb on the top of the saw and press down. You can see on my saw there's a sort of worn place where the acids of my thumb have eaten through the finish because I'm a beast. So grip, I usually put one of my knees lower than the other one so that the saw tips that way a little bit. I just find that helps with my arm. My arm feels better. So grip, press down, wrap the fingers under and pull up. Notice that this makes an S sort of curve. It's a little bit hard to there. So the biggest curve, like in a capital S in most fonts, is the lower one. The top curve is smaller. You can mess with that later, but for now, leave that as it is. You want your bottom curve to be the bigger, the deeper curve, and it's hard to get a good angle on that, and your top curve to be smaller. So like deeper on the bottom, less deep on the top. You don't have to use a bow to play the saw, you can use anything. The saw itself and that S curve is what's making the vibrations, so as long as you can get the saw to vibrate with something, it's going to make a sound. No, that's a bookmark. License plate. You just need to get the saw vibrating, so grip, push down, pull up, and it goes. Hi. Guffin, stay out of this. The place where the noise comes from, is where those two curves intersect. The lower curve, dink, the higher curve, bink, and right there is where the noise comes from. That's called the node, or at least that's what I call it. The pitch that the saw makes depends on how thick the metal is that it's going through. So like down here there's a lot of metal, you're going to have a low pitch. Up here there's very little metal, you're going to have a high pitch. By pressing your elbow open and closed, you change where that flat spot is and you change where the node is. So you change how much metal the vibration is going through and what the pitch is. So I try to keep my grip very firm and my wrist in pretty much the same place. That way the only variable is the shoulder and elbow angle. Much easier to keep track of. I'm going to leave the bow out for now. So like now you can sort of see the flat spot is there. Now it's higher up the saw and it's a higher pitch. When you're playing the bow, I hold the bow like this. I put my thumb on the frog, wrap my fingers around. This is not how you hold the bow when you play anything else. To get a clean tone, it's important to keep your bow at a 90-degree angle to your saw as much as possible. So like, you don't want to go have fancy X angles like that. You don't want to go closer to or further from the saw. You want to have 90-degree angles as much as possible. So playing a saw is really easy. That's really all there is to it. Or it's not complicated, I should say. It takes a lot of practice. And the thing that takes most practice is figuring out where your pitches are going to be. I saw a guy at a saw festival one time who had actually drawn with Sharpie marker where each note was. So he'd be like, I'm playing an E now, bing, and he totally was. I thought that was crazy, but the more I think about it, the more I think it's a really good idea, because otherwise you have no idea. You just listen and hope for the best. You can play a saw as long as you can whistle on key. If you have trouble with that, you're going to have trouble playing a saw, because it's all just hearing things. For instance, if I were going to play Somewhere Over the Rainbow, I'd be like, okay, where's a note? Good, there's a note. So if I know that that note is my first note, then my next note is going to be 1 octave up. Yep, so that's not... I have good days and bad saw days. Today's a bad saw day. So it's mostly just listening. You aren't going to be like, okay, now where's my next note? That would be really tedious. Because the saw is a sliding note and it has a lot of ring, you can just listen and stop when you get to the note. So you could probably tell that in the middle of the bridge there, I completely shifted key, so when we came back to the verse, we were in a different key than we were when we started. Most of playing the saw is just about keeping track of your relative pitches, so that doesn't happen. It can be easier to play saw with somebody else, like with a keyboard instrument or something that stays on key, so that you have that to refer back to and figure out where you are. It can also be hard, because then you know when you're doing terrible things, and when you're almost on pitch but not quite, and your keyboardist is going like, please stop. So that's how you play the saw. Lots and lots of practice finding where the flat spot is. Now you can annoy your neighbors.